everyone, and welcome back to my channel. A few weeks ago I did a post in which I asked you whether you would like to make some menswear once in a while, and 62% really liked that. So back in the day I used to make quite some menswear blazers, button downs, shirts, whatever, but I stopped with that and I just continued with women's clothing. But my son Jonah asked me lately to make some shirts for him because he had some really favorite ones that were really worn out, but he couldn't find them again in the stores, so I recreated them. And this week we're gonna make a long sleeve with a really nice color. That was really one of his favorites, and I'll show you how to make it. It is not difficult, so certainly also for beginners. And it's a really nice one to make and to start with. And I also show you what kind of fabric you can use best for that, because there are all kinds of fabrics and when you have to buy online, sometimes it's rather difficult to get the right one, so you really need to know what you need to buy. If you like this kind of videos, please consider subscribing. As I said, most will be women's clothing. Just once in a while, when you like it, I will do some menswear. But mostly it will be women's clothing, and it will be make what you see in the shops. So for the new viewers, I usually recreate women's clothing that you see in the shops or online, and I show you how you can recreate it. I'll give you the pattern so that you make it to your own sizing, and I show you how to sew it, and I give you the end result. So if you like that, please consider subscribing, and I'll show you what we're gonna make and how we're gonna make it. So it will be just a pretty basic long sleeve. The only special thing is it has a V with a collar with an overlap. So it goes left over right with 3 buttons here and 3 loops. And that's the only thing, but that makes it really looking more special than just plain long sleeve. Of course, long sleeves. And that's it. So for the fabric, you must make sure you have the right fabric that you want. And if you have to buy online like me, sometimes that can be rather difficult, because these are 3 different fabrics, but they are all marketed as t-shirt fabrics. So to figure out which one is the right one is sometimes very difficult if you cannot buy it in store. So this one is a viscose fabric, and maybe you can see it is rather thin and flowy, and it's a very nice fabric. It's a viscose blend, I must say. But most men or boys don't really like it, because it doesn't feel like a normal t-shirt you buy in the store. I must say I like it very much for my clothing, but for many men this is too thin and too flowy. They like more of a grip to their t-shirts. This one is a cotton, and you see probably this is a little bit more thicker, a little bit more sturdy, still rather flowy, but it is not that thin and loose as this one. And then you have an interlock that is really not really more thick than this one, but really more sturdy. It's not that flowy, it doesn't fall that nicely in my opinion, and this is something that is more for well, not for a t-shirt. I'm thinking now what to make out of it. More for a skirt or something, or jog pants, or something that you don't really want too thick of a fabric, but also don't need the nice flow to your body. I cannot really give an example, but this is just, I think you can see it when I move it like this. This is rather flowy and this is more stiff. So what I think is the best fabric for men's t-shirts is this one, the cotton t-shirt fabric. The cotton jersey, because that is for most men the nicest fabric that they like on their body. So I'm gonna use this one for our t-shirt. Then for the pattern, of course now we don't have the basic pattern as we normally have for our own clothing. So what you can do is just make a basic pattern for the person you want to make it, just as we do for ourselves, by taking the body measurements and then draw that out. What you also can do is clone a t-shirt that they have, just lay that on a piece of paper and draw that out. The down part I should know already, I don't really like it, because then you really have to make sure that the fabric of that shirt is exactly the same as this one, the same thickness, the same flow, the same what's it called? I'll put the word here, I don't know the word in English, because otherwise you have the chance that your t-shirt won't fit. So better take the measurements and then give it 2 centimeters on either side extra, so that your shirt is not fitted but just nice and loose. And then draw out your pattern. It's just straight on here, straight on there. Measure how low he wants the armhole to be, so that's curved. Measure how wide the shoulders should be, and you can just measure that by standing in front of him, and then measure from the left shoulder to the right shoulder, and then divide that in two, and then you know how wide this must be. And then you can see from where the neck ends to where the shoulder ends, you can measure that out. Mine is 10 centimeters here. This is a size medium, and then my pattern is 26 centimeters. Then you have an example how much it is. And the length I took 66 centimeters, but I must say, in my country, the people are very long, so maybe 66 is way too long for the person you're making it for. So just measure it on that person what the right length is, and then you can do it like that. Then you have your front and your back pattern. Because we're gonna make a V here for that collar, you have to take that away from your front pattern, and I'll measure how low I made mine here. I made my V 11 centimeters lower than the back, so that is 13 centimeters lower than the straight across from your shoulder. So measure out that distance down and then cut that off for your front pattern. Then for the sleeve, here you can just, when you want to be easy, just clone a long sleeve of a t-shirt that you have in the right size. Again, make sure it is almost the same fabric as you have now. If you don't want to clone, then just make a basic pattern as I did for ourselves, and I will leave down below how you do that. It's just the same as for a women's clothing. Just measure out how long you want the sleeve to be. Mine is 64, and make sure that your sleeve is wide enough. So here at the underarm it is 40 centimeters. Then you have an example how much it must be. And I make the bottom of my sleeve now, we don't cuff it, so I make it just for a hem, is 24 centimeters. So that's your pattern for the front, the back and the sleeve. And then we have to cut a collar, and I have to flip my pattern, otherwise I cannot read it. We're gonna make the collar that is going here into the V. That has to be 28 centimeters wide, and then it's doubled up. And 80 centimeters long, and that is also including the overlap. So it's just a straight on rectangle that you cut for that collar. So we have our pieces cut out. The front, of course, on the fold, the back also on the fold, 2 sleeves, and here the rectangle for our collar. So what we're going to start with is sewing the shoulder seam. So open up your front pattern right side up, and put on top of that right sides together your back pattern. And then we're going to sew both our shoulder seams. So of course match them up nicely, pin them down and sew them. And because we are working with a jersey, you must be sure that you have a ballpoint needle or a jersey needle. Use the stretch stitch on your machine or a zigzag stitch. If you have, also put them on a stretchy fabric setting. Not every machine has it, but if you have it, certainly use it, because then you get less pressure onto your fabric, so it won't stretch out that much. And what is also now, certainly in my country, available is stretchy thread. And that means that your stitch won't break that easily. But because you use a zigzag or a stretchy stitch, it shouldn't break. But just in case, you can also use stretchy thread. And you can use that on the cone and in the bobbin. Now we're gonna pin on the sleeves, and I laid my front and my back open. So this is the front, this is the back, this is the armhole. And what you do is you mark the middle of your sleeve with a pin, and then you line that pin with your shoulder seam, and let the seam of the shoulder go to the back, and then you align the mid of your sleeve with that seam. You pin the ends of the head of your sleeve to the end of your armhole on both sides, and then you pin the whole sleeve into the armhole. And this is what most people think the more easy way to put in a sleeve, unless you can also of course first finish the sleeve seam and then sew your sleeve in, but most people find that more difficult. So you can do it like that. Just make sure that this is nicely distributed in the armhole, in the front and the back. Pin that all the way down, and then sew that all the way down for both of your sleeves. And when you've done that, you have your sleeve into your shirt. So our sleeves are in. What you can do if you want is top stitch the shoulder seam and here the armhole seam. You can do that with a twin needle or just with a normal needle. I'm not going to do that. I like it more when it's just plain like this, but if you like, you can do that now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew the sleeve seams and the side seams, and you can do that in one row. So put them again right sides together, and just align here your armhole seams together. Then you can pin your side seam and you can pin your sleeve seam, and then you can stitch that just in one row on both sides. Gonna put on the collar, and the best way to do it is to do it in steps. What I first did is I marked here with the pin where the mid front is, and then I don't know if you can see it, but I made a reinforcement stitching here in that V, just a normal straight stitch with in the form of that V with exactly the point where the pin is, and it's just to make sure that it doesn't stretch out strangely and that you can easily cut it in when you have sewn your collar on. Then what you do is you take one side, one edge of your collar, doubled up of course, with the fold here on the right, and then you match up the end of your collar with the pin in the mid front, with some seam allowance of course. And I like to pin this from the inside because I like to sew it from the inside, because then I can exactly see where I made my reinforcement stitching here on the inside, and then I can just align it with that, just stitch it over or just a little bit outside of it, and then pin this whole part of your collar down and then stitch that down, and I'll come back for the next step. Now what you do is you flip the part of the collar to that side. So you flip it over the midpoint, and you see that this is coming with it, but it's not a problem. You're just gonna line up here the other side of your collar, and you're gonna do that around here the end of your seam, and you pin it around that pin that you put in. So you're just gonna see where did I stop with my stitching here on this side, and exactly there you're gonna put your pin in to flip it all around. And then you must make sure, and when you have it under your sewing machine you can feel it, that you don't get a bump here. And when you want to sew it in one row, what you can do is just here in the middle, in the mid front, you put your needle in, and then you turn your fabric, and then you put your pressure foot down again, and you can sew along. So that's a nice thing to do too, but for beginners that usually is a bit difficult. But you must just make sure that you put your pin exactly in the mid front and then pin it back on. And again, I will pin it from the inside, but of course if you prefer you can also do it from the outside. See, now you have no bumps here, and the stitching here from the first row goes into the next row. Make sure that it's really nicely attached. So pin then the rest of the collar down. So then when you pinned the collar all the way around, here you're gonna start overlapping the part that you just attached here on the right side. You just pin that on top of it, and then you can sew just on top of the stitching that you just did. Make sure, as I said, that you are certainly gonna match up here the stitching in the V. And what I would like to do, you can also pin this now to this side. I like to do that later on when I've sewed it on, that I'm sure that I'm not messing up with the V here. So I'm gonna leave this loose now until I have sewed my collar on. And you can choose whether you want to sew from the bottom side, so that you can see here where your stitching ends, or whether now you want to sew it from the collar side. It doesn't matter, it's just whatever you prefer. But make sure that here on the side where you already attached the collar, you are matching up the seam or the stitching. Our collar is nice and neat. Make sure your V is nice, press it down if you need to. Then what I did, I took a little scrap that I had left and I made a small string out of it. If you have a thinner jersey, then you could just cut off 1 centimeter wide strip and pull on it, and then it will roll up on itself. Mine is a little bit thicker, so I didn't, so I folded together, sewed it, then turned it with my loop turner. Then you can very easily turn such a small string right side out, and then you have something like this. Pull a bit on it, and then you just got 3 pieces for your buttons. I always recycle buttons, so these are old buttons that I have in a box that I always keep. My mother already collected them, and I took it over and put some new old buttons in. And then you take a piece of your string, see how long you want it to be, and then you sew it here on the collar, and then after that you just sew on your button. I think that's the easiest way. They don't have to open up. You can also first put your buttons on and then the string, but I think that's not really comfortable to do. So I'm first gonna measure out and then sew it on. You don't have to finish here the ends because jersey doesn't fray. You can just cut it off nice and straight, then sew it on with the sewing machine or by hand, what you prefer, and then sew on your buttons. And then the only thing that we have to do is hem the bottom of your shirt and the bottom of your sleeves. I'm gonna do that with a twin needle, because then you get a nice double stitching here on the right side and a zigzag on the one side. You don't have to finish then the edges, because the zigzag is already the finish. What I would suggest, first make also here a test piece, because sometimes your twin needle doesn't go right the first time, and you have to make some adjustments on your machine to get it nicely done. But I think that's a very nice way to finish it. You can also just do a normal top stitch, or top stitch it twice, then you also have the double stitching. You can then zigzag the edges, but as I said, you don't have to, because it doesn't fray. But if you want a more nice polished finish also from the inside, then I would zigzag or serge it first and then do the stitching. But with twin needle you're just done in one time, and it gives a very nice result. So I'm gonna do that for the bottom and for my sleeves. Put on my buttons, and then your shirt is finished. And I hope your son, husband, partner, neighbor, whoever is very happy with the result. And you see, the shirt fits really nicely. The column gives it a little bit something special, something different that attracts the eye, and the buttons make it totally done. And it's a really nice shirt. The quality of this t-shirt fabric is very, very nice. It's just a little bit more heavy than the thinner ones, and that wears also more nicely. Too sad because of the stain that I made there in the front. I was really sad that happened just before we started filming, and I couldn't take it out, so I washed it and still couldn't get it out. But it's a really nice shirt, it's a nice color, and it looks very good on him, I think. And of course you can also put the collar more up, or even fold it down, not just crumble it up, but also fold it, whatever you like. It's very versatile, and it always looks very nice and put together.